Father Michael had served at St. Agnes Church for nearly 20 years. It wasn't a grand cathedral, just a small stone parish on the edge of town, surrounded by pines and silence. The kind of church where the same 20 faces showed up every Sunday, and the bells still rang by hand. He loved the quiet of it, the smell of old wood and candle wax, the sound of echoing footsteps on the marble floor after everyone had gone home. But lately, the quiet had begun to feel wrong. It started 3 weeks ago, when he first noticed the confessional door. Every night Father Michael would lock the church himself, check the sacristy, snuff out the candles, and make sure the old wooden confessional near the back was closed. But each morning, when he returned, the door to the left booth was open again. Every single morning, he'd close it, lock it, double-check the latch. And yet somehow by dawn it would stand ajar. At first, he thought maybe one of the cleaning staff was using it for storage, or that one of the homeless men sometimes sneaking into the church at night had hidden there. But there were no footprints, no signs of intrusion, nothing missing. It was like the door simply refused to stay shut. Then came the voice. It was a Wednesday evening, after Vespers. The church was empty, the candles still flickering low, casting faint orange light on the statues. He was gathering hymn books when he heard it. A soft murmur, coming from inside the confessional, a woman's voice, whispering, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The words froze him in place. The church was locked. He was the only one inside. He hesitated, then approached the booth. "Who's there?" he asked, no answer. He stepped closer, his heart hammering. "Ma'am, the church is closed. You'll need to—" The whisper came again, clearer this time. "I have sinned." Father Michael swallowed hard, then slowly reached for the confessional door. He opened it, empty. The booth was completely dark inside. He stepped in, half expecting to see someone crouch below the seat, but there was nothing. Only the faint scent of incense and something else beneath it. Something sour, like old damp wood. He checked the other side, the priest's side, and saw that the small wooden shutter between the two booths was open. He was certain he had closed it that morning. That night, Father Michael stayed late in his office, reading scripture to steady himself, but every creak of the old building made him flinch. When he finally left around midnight, he turned off the last light and locked the heavy doors. Just before he stepped outside, he glanced back. The nave was dark, except for a single candle still burning near the confessional. He hadn't lit it. The next morning, he arrived early for Mass. The doors were still locked from the inside, just as he'd left them. But when he walked down the aisle, his breath caught in his throat. The confessional door was open again. Inside, resting neatly on the wooden bench, was a rosary. It wasn't his. The beads were black and slick, like they'd been soaked in water. The cross at the end was rusted. He picked it up, and the moment he did, he heard it again, that whisper. Closer this time, right beside his ear. "Father, are you ready to listen?" He dropped the rosary and stumbled back, his knees hitting the marble floor. The whisper stopped instantly. The church was dead silent again. He looked around, trembling, scanning every corner. No one, no movement, just the stillness of the morning light through the stained glass. And yet, from somewhere deep in the confessional, something clicked. A sound like a latch turning. The door, the one that never stayed shut, had closed itself. That night, he decided to stay and find out who, or what, was behind it. He set up a small chair near the back pew, hidden in the shadows, and waited. The clock above the altar ticked softly. The candles flickered lower and lower. At exactly 2:14 a.m., he heard it. A gentle creak. The confessional door opening. Then, a whisper, softer than breath. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." Father Michael's pulse thudded in his ears. He leaned forward in the pew, staring into the dark. The whisper had come again, from that same confessional. A low, trembling voice of a woman. He waited, breath held. The church was still, the air thick. The voice continued. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to hurt her." Michael's throat went dry. The sound was so soft, so close. It felt like the speaker was only inches away. Yet the booth was empty. He rose slowly, clutching the small wooden cross that hung from his neck. "Who's there?" he called, his voice shaking. The whisper paused, then almost pleadingly, "Please, hear me out." He stepped forward, every creak of the floor echoing like thunder in the empty church. When he reached the confessional, the air around it was colder, a damp chill like the inside of a cellar. He pulled the curtain aside. The booth was empty, but something had changed. Faint carving scratched into the wood that hadn't been there before. Words, I confessed. He didn't forgive me. Michael's hand trembled as he traced the marks. The wood was fresh, splintered, carved recently. He backed away, whispering a prayer under his breath. The next morning, he called the diocese. He tried to explain that something strange was happening, that maybe a disturbed parishioner had been sneaking in at night. The voice on the other end dismissed it. Perhaps you're overtired, Father Michael. Take a few days. Churches can play tricks on lonely men. He hung up feeling worse. He wasn't lonely, not until now. That evening, despite everything, he returned to the church. He couldn't stay away. The confessional door was open again. Inside, he found muddy footprints on the floorboards. Small, like a woman's. They led from the pews, straight into the booth. But none came out. He spent the night in the rectory, unable to sleep. Around 3 a.m., a sharp knock echoed through the hall. He froze. Another knock. Slower. Deliberate. It was coming from the chapel. He grabbed his lantern and went down the corridor. The light flickered as he approached the church doors. They were locked, but from the other side came a muffled sound. Not quite a knock this time, more like someone dragging their fingers down the wood. Then a whisper, faint through the thick oak. Father, please forgive me. He dropped the lantern. The flame sputtered out, plunging him into darkness. The next morning, the church cleaner found Father Michael kneeling at the altar. His eyes were red, his face pale. He told her he'd had a dream, that a woman had come to him in the night, crying in the confessional, her hands pressed against the screen. She'd said her name was Eleanor Shaw, that she'd lived in town 50 years ago, that she'd done something terrible. But when he tried to bless her, she'd begun to scream, not in fear, but in rage. He woke up to find the confessional door wide open again. Inside, the small wooden shutter between the two booths was now broken off its hinges. Father Michael began to dig through parish records, searching for any mention of Eleanor Shaw. He found her name buried in the archives, a woman who had drowned herself in the river behind the church in 1972. Her last confession had been made the night before she died. The priest on duty that night was found dead the next morning. No cause ever determined. The record ended there. That night, Father Michael went back to the confessional one last time. He lit a single candle and sat down in the priest's booth. He whispered softly through the open shutter, "If you are lost, Eleanor, you can be forgiven, but you must let go." Silence. Then from the other side came a slow breath, and a whisper, soft, cracked, and wet with tears. "I waited for you to say that." The candle flickered violently. The air grew icy cold. The confessional walls groaned, the wood bending as if something inside was pressing against it. The light went out. When the sun rose the next morning, parishioners found the church doors open wide. The confessional door was closed for the first time in weeks. On the small wooden bench inside lay a single black rosary, perfectly dry this time. Father Michael was never seen again. Only one thing remained on the inside wall of the confessional, scratched deep into the wood. "He forgave me." They hired Thomas to guard St. Helena's Church after the renovations began. It was a 150-year-old building, surrounded by scaffolding, draped in tarps and dust. The congregation had stopped meeting there months ago, leaving only the echo of old prayers behind. Thomas didn't mind. He'd been a night watchman most of his life. Warehouses, schools, construction sites, places that looked different when the sun went down. But he'd never guarded a church before. On his first night, the contractor handed him the keys and a flashlight. "Place is solid," the man said, glancing up at the dark tower. "Just don't go down to the basement. It's unstable from the flooding. Stay upstairs. Keep the lights on. If anything moves, it's probably rats." Thomas had nodded. Simple enough. He didn't believe in ghosts. Just long hours and bad lighting. By midnight, the rain had started. Slow at first, then hard, pounding against the stained glass windows. The beams creaked, tarps flapped outside, and the sound of water dripping into buckets echoed through the nave. Thomas sat near the back pew with a thermos of coffee and his radio. Static hummed softly in the empty space. It was quiet. Too quiet. He tried to distract himself by walking the aisles, shining his flashlight across the scaffolding and pews. His boots echoed on the old floor. That's when he noticed something odd. The altar candles were lit. He froze. He hadn't lit them. He was certain of it. He'd done his rounds an hour ago, and the altar had been dark. He stepped closer, the light trembling in his hand. The candles burned clean and tall, though there was no sign anyone had struck a match. The air didn't even smell like smoke. Probably one of the workmen forgot, he muttered to himself. He blew them out. An hour later, as he sat at his desk near the back, the faint sound of organ keys drifted through the air. Low, hollow notes. Just 3 repeating. Over and over, Thomas froze again. There was no power to the organ. He'd seen the disconnected cables himself when he'd started his shift. He stood, the flashlight shaking in his hand, and walked toward the front of the church. The sound grew louder. Deep, heavy chords pressing into the silence. When he reached the altar, the music stopped. He aimed his flashlight at the organ. The bench was empty. He stepped closer. The keys were pressed down, like invisible fingers were still resting on them. Then, they rose. Slowly, one by one. Thomas stumbled back, the beam of light jerking across the walls. "Who's there?" he called, no answer. He checked the front doors, locked. Windows, all sealed shut. He walked back to his desk, trying to laugh it off, but the church didn't feel empty anymore. The air was different, heavy, humming with something unseen. He switched on the small space heater beside him. It hummed weakly, blowing lukewarm air. Then the heater clicked off. The radio went dead. The only sound left was the slow dripping of water from somewhere up above. Steady, rhythmic drip, drip, drip. He shone the flashlight upward. The ceiling above the altar was leaking. The water was running down the wall behind the crucifix, tracing a line down the wooden figure of Christ. But the water wasn't clear. It was dark, almost black. Thomas climbed onto the first pew, then onto the railing to get a closer look. He thought maybe it was rust or paint from the renovation. But as he touched it, the liquid smeared across his hand, thick, sticky. He shined the flashlight. It was red. His stomach dropped. He looked again, but the drip had stopped. The wall was clean. The crucifix looked perfectly normal. He blinked hard, shaking his head. "I'm seeing things," he muttered. He turned back toward his desk. That's when he saw the basement door. It was standing open. He froze in place. The contractor had said to never go down there, but he couldn't ignore it. The door was open wide, and from the darkness below came the faint sound of footsteps, not echoing like his own. Slow, dragging steps, as if someone was moving through mud. Thomas took a deep breath and stepped toward the stairwell. "Hello?" he called. "Anyone down there?" Silence, then a whisper, faint and hoarse. "Don't let them lock me in again." The flashlight flickered. Thomas turned to run, but behind him, the confessional door creaked open by itself. Thomas stood frozen between the open confessional and the dark stairwell yawning beneath the church. Rain hammered the roof. The power stayed off. The air smelled like wet wood and candle smoke. He forced himself to breathe. "Probably just wind," he muttered, though even saying it out loud didn't make it feel true. There was no wind strong enough to open a basement door. He pointed the flashlight down the stairs. The beam cut through the dust, landing on the stone steps below. A shallow puddle shimmered halfway down, rainwater maybe. He took one cautious step, then another. Each footfall echoed like a heartbeat in the narrow stairwell. The basement was colder than he expected. The kind of cold that felt heavy, like it pressed against his skin. His light swept across crumbling walls, old pews stacked in piles, paint cans, and a few boxes marked with the church's name. At first, it looked empty. Then he saw footprints, bare, human footprints, wet and dark, leading deeper into the basement. They weren't his, too small, too thin. The sound came again, a slow dragging noise, as if someone were moving something heavy across the floor. He followed the prints until they vanished near a rusted iron door half sunk into the back wall. The dragging stopped. "Hello?" he called, his voice low. "I'm security. You're not supposed to be here." Silence. Then a whisper, so close it seemed to come from behind the door itself. "They buried me here." Thomas jumped back, the flashlight beam shaking wildly. "Who's there?" No reply. He gripped the handle. It was ice cold, rusted over, but it turned. The hinges screamed as the door opened a few inches, enough for the smell to hit him. Damp, earthy, old. He raised the light. Beyond the door was a small stone chamber, maybe 8 feet wide, with a single wooden chair in the center. Chains hung from the ceiling, and on the far wall, scrawled in black, uneven letters, "Forgive us, Father." Thomas's throat tightened. He wanted to back away, to shut the door and never come back. But then something caught his eye. A photograph, half buried in the dirt. He picked it up. It showed a group of nuns standing in front of St. Helena's, smiling stiffly. Behind them, at the bottom edge of the picture, a small girl knelt, hands clasped in prayer. Someone had circled her face in ink. On the back, in faint handwriting. She heard the voices too. He barely had time to process the words before a deep clang echoed behind him. The basement door had slammed shut. The flashlight flickered. He spun around. "Hey! Who's there?" Something moved in the shadows, a shape too small to be an adult, stepping forward one hesitant pace at a time. Thomas aimed the light. It was a girl, barefoot, soaked to the knees, her white dress clinging to her like she'd been standing in rain for hours. She looked up at him, eyes dark and wide. "You heard them too, didn't you?" she asked softly. He tried to answer, but his voice wouldn't come. The girl pointed toward the iron door. "They locked me in there. I prayed and prayed, but no one came." Then she smiled, a small, broken smile. "But now you're here." The light sputtered, went out completely. In the dark, Thomas stumbled backward, reaching for the stairs. But the air changed. Thicker, alive, whispering all around him. He could hear dozens of voices now, layered over one another. Crying, praying, begging. A sound like chains dragging across stone. He bolted toward where the stairs should have been, his hands outstretched, and touched cold stone. "No door, no way out!" The whispers grew louder, circling him. Then, from somewhere behind him, the girl's voice, calm and clear. "Stay with us. They won't hurt you anymore." He turned, the flashlight finally flickering back to life. Just long enough to see dozens of pale faces watching him from the shadows. Then, everything went black. At sunrise, the foreman found the basement door sealed shut again. Thomas's radio and flashlight were lying by the stairs. His jacket still hung on the chair near the altar, but he was gone. The police searched for 3 days and found nothing. No footprints, no sign of struggle. When they finally forced open the old iron door, the chamber was empty, except for one thing. A new photograph pinned to the wall. It showed the same group of nuns, and one more figure added to the background. Thomas, standing behind them, hands folded, smiling faintly. The storm came out of nowhere. Daniel had been driving through the countryside when the rain started. A sudden downpour that swallowed the road in seconds. The wipers couldn't keep up. The wind howled like a living thing. He was miles from town, the phone signal long gone, when lightning split the sky and he saw it through the blur of rain. An old church, standing alone at the edge of the woods. Its windows glowed faintly yellow, a single light inside. He pulled off the road and parked near the steps. Water gushed down the hill, soaking his shoes as he ran for cover. The heavy wooden doors were unlocked. Inside it was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled of dust and candle wax. The light came from a single oil lamp burning near the altar. "Hello?" Daniel called out, shivering. No answer. Only the echo of his voice disappearing into the rafters. He stepped inside and pushed the doors closed behind him. The thunder outside muffled instantly, as if the walls themselves were swallowing the sound. The church looked abandoned. Wooden pews coated in dust. Hymnals scattered. Cobwebs hanging from the crucifix. But someone had to have lit that lamp. He approached the altar. The flame flickered gently, steady despite the draft. Beside it sat a Bible, open to a verse he didn't recognize. He leaned closer and read aloud, almost whispering. "And the doors shall not be shut day nor night, for the voice of the watchers shall not sleep," he frowned. That didn't sound like anything from scripture he remembered. He turned at a sound, the soft creak of a pew shifting behind him. "Hello?" No reply. He raised the lamp and looked down the long aisle. The pews were empty, but the door he'd just come through was now open. Wide open, though there was no wind anymore. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms rise. He shut the door again, this time sliding the old iron bolt across it. Then he sat in one of the front pews, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant this time, like the storm was moving on. He told himself he'd wait an hour, maybe two, until it passed, then drive back to town. He must have dozed off. When he woke, the lamp was still burning, but the light was dimmer. The church was pitch dark beyond the altar. The storm had stopped completely. Not even rain. He checked his phone. Still no signal, no bars. That's when he heard it. A low, rhythmic sound, a knock, coming from somewhere near the back of the church. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. He swallowed hard and stood, holding the lamp out in front of him. "If someone's there, I can call for help," he said, though his voice cracked halfway through. No response. The knocking stopped. He waited a long moment, straining to listen. Then, from the far end of the aisle, came a new sound. Footsteps. Soft, uneven, like bare feet on the wooden floor. Daniel backed up slowly toward the altar, the lamp trembling in his grip. The light danced across the pews. Empty, 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 until it landed on the last row. A shadow stood there. He froze. The figure didn't move. It was just standing between the pews, head slightly tilted, too still to be human. "Hey," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. "Do you need help?" No answer. The figure didn't even breathe. Then the light flickered, once, twice, and the shadow was suddenly closer, 1 row nearer. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. "Stay back!" The lamp sputtered again, dimming to a weak orange glow. When it steadied, the figure was gone. Completely gone. He ran to the doors, fumbling with the bolt, but it wouldn't move. The iron felt fused, welded shut. He pulled, kicked, slammed his shoulder against it, but the lock didn't budge. The air behind him shifted. He turned. All the pews were empty again, but the Bible on the altar had closed itself. The flame of the lamp rose suddenly higher, stretching tall and thin, as if something unseen had just breathed in. Then he heard it. A whisper. So faint it might have been the wind, except the words were clear. "The watchers never sleep." Daniel stood frozen by the altar, the whisper still hanging in the air like smoke. "The watchers never sleep." He could still hear it, repeating somewhere between the walls, soft as breathing. The lamp's flame hissed and steadied again. He turned in slow circles, trying to see where the sound came from. The church was small. There shouldn't have been room for echoes to move like that. It sounded close, then far, as if voices were walking through the dark. He told himself it was the wind, but there was no wind anymore. No rain, no thunder. Only the ticking of the old clock above the choir loft, steady, mechanical, until he realized the clock hands hadn't moved since he came in. They were stuck at 3:17. He decided he needed to leave, even if it meant breaking a window. He moved down the aisle, careful not to look too long into the rows of empty pews. The lamp threw his shadow across the walls, tall, shaking, stretching toward the ceiling beams. When he reached the back of the church, he noticed something new. A door he hadn't seen before, half hidden behind a collapsed hymn board. It was narrow, covered in dust, the handle black with age. At first he thought it might lead outside. Then he saw the sign carved above it. Watcher's room. He hesitated, but something inside him, the part that wanted answers more than safety, made him open it. A short stone stairway led downward into the dark. The air was colder here, damp, filled with the smell of earth and mold. He held the lamp higher. The flame trembled. At the bottom of the stairs was a small crypt-like chamber. On the walls hung faded portraits, painted faces of men and women, all dressed in black, eyes wide, staring forward. The frames were cracked, the paint flaking off, but one thing about them was clear. None of the faces had pupils, just blank white eyes. Daniel stepped closer, the light brushing over each one. Someone had carved dates beneath them, centuries apart. 1873, 1921, 1966. All beneath the same inscription. They kept watch through the storm. A soft rustling came from the corner of the room. He turned sharply. A figure was sitting there, half hidden in the shadows. A person, wrapped in dark robes, unmoving. Hey! I didn't mean to break in, Daniel said quickly, raising the lamp. I was just trying to get out of the storm. The figure didn't move. Are you all right? He asked. Then it turned its head toward him. The face beneath the hood was old and dry, the skin gray as parchment. Its lips were pulled back, frozen in a faint smile, eyes white and glassy like the ones in the paintings. Daniel staggered backward, the lamp shaking violently in his hands. The figure didn't follow. It only raised one thin hand and pointed toward the wall behind him. He turned and saw words scratched deep into the stone. They will watch until another takes their place. Something cracked above him. A dry, splintering sound. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then he heard movement. Not footsteps this time, but a slow, steady scraping, as if wood and stone were shifting. He ran for the stairs, the lamp sputtering in his grasp. When he reached the top, the door he'd entered through had vanished. Only a blank wall of old wood stood there. He hit it with his shoulder once, twice. Help! Somebody! No answer. Only the whisper again, closer now. Many voices overlapping. You found us. Now you'll keep watch. The portraits on the walls were changing. Their eyes, those blank pale eyes, were beginning to turn. Each face now looked at him directly, watching, blinking slowly for the first time in decades. The lamp went out. Darkness swallowed everything. He could still hear them moving, their bare feet brushing against the stone floor. Cold fingers brushed his sleeve, then silence. When morning came, the storm had cleared. A traveler passing on the road noticed the church doors wide open and went inside, thinking maybe someone had forgotten to lock up. He found the pews dusted in fresh mud footprints that led toward the altar, and stopped there. On the altar sat the oil lamp, still warm, and above it, the Bible lay open again. A new verse had been added, written in ink that was still wet. And the doors shall not be shut day nor night, for the new watcher keeps his vigil. No one ever found Daniel's car, but if you pass by that old church on a stormy night, you might see a faint yellow light in the window, and a shadow that never seems to move.